Hello everyone, good afternoon. I just had to subtly turn my telephone volume down there as I was playing myself back. I'm watching the live video so I can check your comments as they come in. How you all doing? Hope you're all having a great week. Another week goes by, it's another lockdown live video from us. So happy Friday to you, hope you've had a good one. It's been a good week here. Everything seems to be going very well as far as the guitar industry is concerned. You guys and girls, I got picked up on that last week and I must not allow myself to fall into that trap once again. You guys and girls have been wonderful with the purchases you've been making, and it's been great to see. As I always say, the enthusiasm for guitar has not waned one jot, so thank you very much to everyone who's been supporting us through this period, online, on the phone, to our sales team, and on the videos here. As always, it's great to see you. Thank you for tuning in. These are a lot of fun to do, so we want to keep these going, so keep watching them, sharing them, liking them, all that stuff. Right, today, it's a fairly obvious what I'm going to do. I'm going to carry on the theme that we established a couple of weeks ago, continued with the last week, and now this seems like the most natural way to offer up a third installment of this kind of little series that I wanted to do, which is a take on a shootout video. It's not a typical shootout where, you know, there's going to be one guitar crowned at the end of this. This is just, I wanted to show you a bunch of really cool T-style guitars. So the first week we did HSS Strat style guitars. Last week we did the single cut Les Paul style instruments. This week we're going to look at T-style guitars, which is, I'm sure anyone who knows anything about the stuff that we do here will have seen I play Telecasters and T-style guitars a lot. They're some of my very favourite instruments to play. They're so flexible, so versatile, and so wonderful. This seems like a really good way to show you just the options that are out there, and I'm sure a lot of people watching will know what kind of options you've got out there, but it's always worthwhile, always valuable to pull them all together in one place, as we've done so in the past. You people seem to like that, so here we are with number 3. So before I delve into the issue at hand, which is going to be this T-style shootout, let me first tell you about the rest of the rig. It's fairly standard for what you would expect to see from us in most of our videos. Dr. Z Maz 38 with a bit of reverb on board. Set pretty clean. The pedals on the floor today are, I don't know why I've never played this pedal before, but I'm really blown away by the Z drive by our friends at Dr. Z as well. It sounds amazing into one of their amplifiers, so that's where most of the gain is going to be coming from. I've also got a little green wonder from our friends at Mad Professor for like the tube screamer type thing, marrying up really nicely with all the guitars. That's the rig. I've got the HX effects as well, of course, for a bit of delay. That's pretty much all I'm using it for. Let's talk about the first guitar. I purposefully didn't start with a Fender Telecaster for good reason. I wanted to build up to that because I want to show you, to kind of prove to the people who maybe don't understand, and I can understand this point where people maybe take some issue sometimes with brands that seem to shamelessly take other brands' designs for their own. I can understand the logic in that, but the reality is quite far from that truth. When you've got a guitar like this, which is from our friends at Reverend, this is the Gristlemaster. So for anyone who doesn't know, this is the signature guitar for Koch, world-renowned Telecaster player, come to a different company here and really invested some really interesting ideas into the T-style format. It looks like a Telecaster, but really, despite being such a well-known Telly guy, he's put a lot of crucial changes in this guitar that make it a very worthy alternative, and I think that's going to be the theme for a lot of these guitars you're going to see. They're not just straight Telecaster copies. If they were, there'd be no point in their existence. What you get with a guitar like this is something that's really different and at a rather attractive price point. So let me just spend a couple of minutes talking about this guitar. I'm going to play it some more, and then I'll address some of the specs as well. So the Gristlemaster, I think, came out last year or maybe the year before, and they've always had very cool colours with some very appropriately Koch style names for the colours, such as POW and some others that I can't remember. This one is Axis Purple. This is one of the latest colours, and I think it's one of the best colours that I've seen in this guitar. It's probably my favourite, I think. You don't often see, this is the other fun thing about other brands taking on this kind of design Fender's got their amazing heritage, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about the Fender guitars, but you don't often see them playing with the formulas too much and experimenting with cool colours like this. That's what you get when you go to a different brand who's got a bunch of fresh ideas. So the Gristlemaster is slightly different to everything else I'm going to show you. It's a slightly larger body. I think it's like 10% larger or something than most T-style guitars. And that is to accommodate the man himself. I think that Greg just wanted to have an instrument that was slightly larger so he didn't feel like he was playing a toy, or rather didn't get comments from people asking me if he was playing a toy. So just the slightly larger body size, I think, adds a slightly different feel to the guitar. I think it's a little bit more balanced than most Tellys would be. You've also got the sort of Firebird inspired, and I'm going to try and get it in that shot. You can see that centerpiece of this guitar is slightly raised like some of the Firebirds used to be. So that's a cool little aesthetic touch, and it allows them to do some different things with the woods on this guitar. So this is actually, as opposed to an alder or an ash body like most T-style guitars would be, this is chambered carina. I think the chambering actually takes place under the pickguard. So different tone woods, different construction, different size, bunch of different things going on, and then you get to the electronics as well. This guitar has the Fishman Fluence Greg Koch signature pickups in this guitar, and what they basically are, Greg will explain it a lot better than me. So if you want to find out some more information about these pickups, check out the videos that we shot with him in the past, where he talked about the entire process that went into these pickups. But it's a totally different take on the pickup game. They're basically the pickup tonality is basically printed on a circuit board on these pickups, so it's not wound in the traditional way. It means that they've got the maximum amount of consistency, and it means that you get an onboard second voicing on this little push-push switch here, which I like. I love these pickups. I've actually got these installed in my Xotic T-style guitar, and they're just so versatile. As you'll have heard at the start, or maybe you didn't if you just joined us, but I'm going to play a little bit more. This just means that you can go from really spanky sort of white guard Telly tones, so kind of the late 50s Telly style sounds when they were getting a little bit, they're not quite as loud as like a blackguard Telly sound, a little bit more top end and more sort of spank to them. Then you push that in and you've got more of an early 50s voicing, so more of a blackguard style voicing. So to have that switchable on one guitar with a really nice smooth treble bleed on the volume control, which means you get a million different sounds and permutations of Telly tone. It's also worth pointing out that this has got the roasted maple on the neck, which is sort of catching on a little bit more these days. You start to see it. In fact, all the guitars I've got here, bar one, which I'll talk about later, have roasted maple on the necks, and it adds something different to the sound. And again, it's not something that you normally see from Fender, despite the fact that both the Fenders I'm going to show you today do have it. It's not usually on the options list, so it's cool to see some alternatives with that roasted maple, if that's what you like. So anyway, let me show you some more tones. I'm going to start clean, and I'll put the Z drive on for a bit of gain, and I'll show you the effect of this cool pickup switch as well, how it changes the sound. Okay, hopefully that got the point across about this, the flexibility of this guitar. Obviously it does all those classic Tellyisms that Greg is known for and needs to have in his signature instrument. But I think when you go to that second voicing and you turn the tone down a bit, you get quite a bit more output, especially on a clean sound, and it can kind of get into almost humbucker territory if you want it to. And that's also the benefit of these pickups, is the fact that they are hum cancelling, they're silent. So really versatile guitar, really cool colour, some really interesting changes to or spins on the Telly theme at a really nice price point as well. So we're really pleased to have these Reverend guitars. This is the latest colour in this model, but I know there's a few more on the way. So if you're interested in this, make sure you get to the website, because I don't think these will stick around for very long. I'm not going to do the whole sales pitch thing on each of these guitars, but I'm really impressed with this guitar. I'm really pleased that we're getting these, and I think the colour is awesome. So I hope you enjoyed that. When I pick up the next guitar, I'll zip through a few of your comments, because I can see that there's a lot coming in, so I'll try and answer your questions before I play the next guitar. Okay. Right, let's have a look at what you're saying. Okay, there's, wow, loads of comments. Now, interesting, someone pointed out quite early on about a vintage T. I'm presuming that's reference to the Friedman. There's a couple of guitars that we have excluded today. You know, there's so many, once again, as I said with the single cut shootout last week, there's so many brands that we stock that we could have spent 2 or 3 hours talking about all the guitars. But there's so many to get through. I just wanted to distill it down to the essence of what a T-style guitar is. And yes, there are guitars that, you know, T-styles with humbuckers on them and P90s and stuff. This is about this kind of tried and true formula. So there's a few omissions today, but that doesn't mean that they're not worthy. It just means that they're not maybe as close to a Fender as some of these other guitars are. So that's the reason there's no Friedman.
Vintage T sold today.
And it's sold. So that's a much more concise reason as to why it's not here. The Friedman has gone. Question about the Xotic Junior. I wanted to include that today, but I don't think we've got one in stock. The Maz is such a great amp anyway. It suits Telecasters and T-style guitars really well. The Xotic Junior is amazing as well. It's basically, for those who don't know, the Dr. Z Xotic is more of a strict AC30 style amp with a few tweaks and modifications, but it's more that strict kind of AC thing. The Maz is a bit more versatile. That's why we use it all the time. The Xocic's probably a little bit juicier and has a little bit more compression, a little bit, I think maybe a little bit harder to play because it's got so much more of that dynamic range and that sparkle. But great amp, just don't have one. Otherwise it probably would have been here. But the Maz is a fantastic amp as well, so hopefully there's not too much confusion there between the two. I'd be happy to play either. So hopefully that's Luke is here and he's well on it with the comments. So if anyone has asked questions, I'm sure he's getting to them before me. So well done over there. Well done, you. Okay.
That's all I need.
So I think that's it for now. But keep them coming in, and I will answer your questions if Luke doesn't pip me to it. So next guitar. Again, before I get to Fender, this is probably in terms of what we sell, the second most popular, I would say, brand of this style of instrument. I'm of course talking about Xotic guitars. I talked about them in the HSS Shootout, actually started that video with an Xotic. We're the UK exclusive dealer here for Xotic guitars. We love them, they make incredible stuff, and this is just another of the kind of standard lineup, if you like, the California Classic series. XTC-1. So what this guitar is Xotic's take on kind of the best elements of vintage Fender tone, but with some modern improvements. The roasted maple neck being one, which is actually quite a nice flamey roasted maple neck on this guitar. Hopefully you can see a bit of that. Went for a Rosewood board model as well, because there's only a couple of other Rosewood guitars in this lineup. Now they do give you the option of alder or ash bodies. This guitar has, I'm just going to check the spec to be certain, this is an alder wood body. It's actually a 4A grade flame roasted neck on this guitar as well, so you get different gradings of the flame. This is a really nice one. So a couple of other tweaks. You've got like a 9.5 inch radius on this guitar, so a little bit flatter than a real traditional style Fender would be, so a little bit easier to play. You've got Goto vintage style locking tuners, so there's nothing, that's what I really like about Xotic. They marry up these two different schools of thought, but they do it really seamlessly. It doesn't look like a modern guitar. There are locking tuners here, but you don't have the little spin wheel locking mechanisms on the back. So aesthetically, it really works in a vintage kind of way. Very lightweight as well. All Xotic guitars are very lightweight, and I think that gives them a lot of resonance. So that's one thing. I mentioned at the start that I put those pickups in my own Xotic, and that's not to say that these pickups aren't amazing, because they really are. These are Xotic's own raw vintage pickups, and as you'll hear when I play, they're every bit as versatile as something like those Fishmans would be, but just in a more traditional Telecaster style sense. So I'm sure you're going to like the sound that these put out as well. So let me play some clean tones. I'll do some gain with the Z drive as well, and then we'll talk a little bit more about just kind of the ethos of Xotic guitars. Yeah! What an awesome guitar. So I think outside of that Fishman loaded Reverend, which is obviously really versatile because it's got the different voicings and stuff, I kind of feel that Xotic probably have the most versatile pickup set in these guitars. So they'll do it all from the real spanky clean thing. At the start that had really nice, beautiful like neck and in between clean tones with a bit of delay from the HX. And then when you pile on the gain, it sounds amazing. It doesn't sound shrill, doesn't sound thin. Sometimes you want that real kind of stingy Telly top end, but this guitar can kind of do that, but in a more controllable way. That's why I really like these. So, kind of the perfect marriage of all things between some of the vintage sensibilities and some of the more modern schools of thought when it comes to the playability and the feature set. That's what makes Xotic so good. So if you were looking for a Fender style instrument and you just want something that's a little bit more refined without going too far in the opposite direction and becoming maybe a little bit sterile or something that isn't reminiscent of a typical Telly tone at all, this sits very comfortably in the ballpark. So there we go, Xotic guitars, love them. Let's talk about the daddy. Of course, Fender, the biggest player in this game. They did invent this design, so it's only fair that I talk about a Fender guitar. When it came to picking a custom shop guitar for this video, this proved to be very difficult because we've got an immense selection of custom shop instruments, and every iteration of Telecaster that the Fender custom shop recreate obviously have their own merits. So you've got the early 50s, the Blackguard style guitars, no-casters and 52 Tellys and broadcasters and stuff. They have a very unique tone, which is typically very bright, quite hot pickups, so quite aggressive sounding. As you move into the mid to late 50s, I think they mellow out a little bit and you get like the 57, 58 Tellys lose a little bit of that Blackguard kind of punch in the face kind of tone, and they just get a little bit sweeter, I think a little bit more versatile. And you'll have heard that distinction in this guitar actually, with the two voices that it's got on tap. It's got that kind of approximated very well. Then of course you move into the 60s and they changed again with the Rosewood fingerboards. As you get to the end of the 60s, they kind of revert back, I think, a little bit more to that stingy top end. So there's a lot of different versions. Very hard to pick a single Telecaster to rep for them all. I think this does a good job though. This is a red sparkle roasted neck on this guitar as well. This is a 52, the red sparkle finish, roasted maple neck. So it's kind of got some options from all worlds, and electronically it does as well, because this is a twisted Telly neck with a 58 bridge, I think. Let me just double check that, because I knew I probably got that the wrong way around.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Wow. Twisted Telly neck pickup in this guitar, which is what we tend to spec the most. It seems to be what people like. And a 58 Telly bridge pickup. So as I said earlier about marrying up those different properties of a little bit less abrasive kind of tonal quality in the bridge pickup with that nice plump round early 50s Telly neck sound. So this is one of the best options, I think, for an all-rounder from Fender's custom shop. And like I said, I could have been really specific and picked a bone stock sort of 52 NOS custom shop. I think most people know what those sound like. This is a guitar I wanted to pay a bit of attention to because it's so cool. There is a Rosewood fingerboard version of this guitar as well, but the maple or roasted maple is kind of where I think this is at. So let me play a little bit and then I'll talk you through some of the rest of the spec of this wonderful Fender. It's just a great Telecaster. That's all you really need to know about this guitar. But I'll tell you some more specs anyway, just so it kind of cements what makes it great. Ash body on this guitar, so it's particularly light. Bless you. Just a little sneeze there. Ash body on this guitar. Journeyman finish as well under the red sparkle, which is cool to have this kind of, this level of really gorgeous finishing, but then you've got a really nice relic job on it as well. The Journeyman finish, I think, is probably the preferred option for most people because it gives you the vibe of an old guitar without really going over the top with kind of beating the heck out of it. It just appeals to most people. I think it's very comfortable as well. They've kind of worn the neck in a tiny bit as well, but nothing really substantial because it's a nice glossy neck. U-shape profile on this, so it's quite a hefty no-caster style neck on this guitar, which is great. Those hand-wound twisted Telly and 58 Telly bridge pickup that I told you about. 9.5-inch radius as well. So I think this is kind of the magic combo spec for most Telly heads out there. If you're looking for a great do-it-all guitar, it's not just the plinky, planky, spanky machine. It will do that, but it will also do some nice warmer tones as well. When you put some gain on it, it doesn't thin out, doesn't get shrill. Just a really nice blend of all things. That's what Fender do very well. That's what this guitar does very well. Sticking with Fender though, I want to show you something that will provide an alternative for you if A, you want something different and a little bit more modern, and B, if you don't want to jump up to custom shop pricing, which is understandable. You know, this competes more directly with the Reverend that I started the video with. So this is an American Pro from Fender, still a USA made guitar, but this is the American Pro is basically the American Standard, is what it was rebranded to a couple of years ago. So that's what we got here. So it's worth pointing out that this is a limited edition version of the guitar, which has a couple of changes to the regular American Pro. One being custom shop 51 no-caster pickups in this guitar. So that's one thing. The other thing is that it's roasted maple neck as well. So as I said, there's actually only one guitar in this entire lineup that doesn't have the roasted maple. It's definitely becoming more and more common in guitars for a very good reason. For anyone who's wondering why, if you don't know about roasted maple, basically roasting the wood dries it out, so that simulates aging, I suppose. It makes the neck a lot more stable, so adjusting to different climates very, very well. You don't have to touch the truss rod very often at all. It also has a different tonal property. I think drying the wood out, as you would find with an older guitar, when it's dried out, it just has a bigger, deeper, more open kind of a sound. On other guitars that I've shown in the past, on these shootouts, the roasted maple seems to add a bit more resonance and depth to the guitar, and almost makes it sound like you tuned a little bit lower, even though you're in standard tuning. I mean, that's quite an extreme example, but that's the impression that it can give sometimes, is that you've just got all this extra heft to the sound. So that's kind of quite a big bonus point for the roasted maple, as well as the stability and all the other stuff I just mentioned. So the American Pro, while I'm tuning, I'll tell you a couple of the other specs. Older wood body on this guitar. So you're going to hear a slight bit more mid-range, I think, than the ash-bodied guitar that I just played. Also, you've got a deep C profile on the neck, so it's nowhere near as enormous as that custom shop guitar was. And same 9.5-inch radius. You've got 22 frets on this guitar as opposed to 21 on the custom shop. You've got jumbo frets on this guitar as well, and the 51 no-caster custom shop pickups. And if that wasn't enough, this limited edition version of this guitar, I think they only made 10 for the UK, and we got the lot. So if you like this is the only place to find it. We've got all 10. So just putting that out there. You better get on this quick if you like it. Let me show you what it sounds like, so hopefully you will like it even more. This is a lot of fun to play, actually, this guitar. I mean, I knew it was good because I've done the listing for it already, but yeah, what an awesome guitar. Sometimes you can't beat the original, so I totally get the argument that people have when they say, why wouldn't you just buy a Fender? If you want a Telly style guitar, just buy a Fender. Yeah, okay, I can see why you would think that, because there are certain elements to the Fender sound that are inimitable and are unmistakable as well. This guitar has that in droves, even more so I think sometimes than some of the custom shop guitars, but the whole point is that everything has its own thing. So if you want a guitar that sounds like an Xotic, you'd buy an Xotic, you wouldn't buy a Fender. So it's not necessarily that Fender has the best tone, but it has the Fender tone, and that's kind of the important distinction to make. And this guitar definitely has that. I really like it, and it's really dynamic as well. This kind of exemplifies the best thing about a T-style guitar for me, which is that it's always got clarity, and it's always got articulation and that snap if you want it there. No matter how much gain you put on, it's always got some really nice kind of clarity and articulation to it. So that is important. That's what this guitar does very well, and hopefully that's a reason for you to pick up one of these 10 of these in the UK. Okay. So, as they say, now for something totally different. This is... Actually, yeah, let me answer some questions first, just make sure I haven't missed anything. I'm zipping through these guitars a little bit quicker than usual, because I know I have a tendency to waffle along. But let me just check that I haven't missed any of your questions before I talk about this cool guitar. Okay, yeah, I've missed a lot of questions. Okay, let me zip back. Someone asked about the pickups in the Xotic. Yeah, they're the raw vintage pickups. I see our good buddy Steve Burrows has already answered that question for us. Thank you, Steve. A lot of questions about Dr. Z. I'd really like to do a live video. It's very difficult comparing amplifiers, but where we talk more about Z, because they're such an amazing amp company. I think I already said, but we are the UK exclusive dealer for Z as well. So we've got the massive privilege of using these amps in pretty much every video we do. People are asking for comparisons of the Maz, the Z-Rec. I saw some questions about the Monza as well, which is a discontinued amp. They just seem to really suit what we try to go for here at Peach, which is just a really simple kind of just stripped back tone that complements pedals, complements different guitars. You really hear the qualities of each of the guitars that I'm playing, largely because of the Z amplifier that I'm playing it through. So there's loads of great Z amps in the range. The Maz is probably the most versatile, which is why we use it a lot. But some of the other amps that people are asking about, we will try and feature more in upcoming videos. Hopefully we'll do a live video all about Z, but just stay tuned for that, because I don't know what we'll do exactly. So yeah, lots of questions about the Z. Some people asked about the playing. Yes, it's all made up. That's why there's a lot of mistakes in there. But thank you for. I'm glad you enjoy it. Yeah, that's most of the stuff we talked about. So, okay, yeah, I'm not going to get too specific on the questions now, lest I dive down a rabbit hole. But talk some more about these guitars. So that's the reason we're using Z anyway. So jumping from that Fender When I said earlier on about guitars that take this design and kind of run with it, I think this is one of the best examples of that. We're not a Tom Anderson dealer as far as I'm aware, but we seem to get one or two every once in a while second hand, and they prove to be really popular and we get a lot of questions about them. Tom Anderson has been making guitars for ages, and he makes these really cool kind of spin-offs of classic designs. He's got the Reverend, for example, which is his take on an offset guitar, like a Jazzmaster style thing, totally different to a Fender Jazzmaster. Same kind of thing here with this model, which is, I think it's just called his Telly. So, you know, it's kind of no qualms about what this guitar is trying to be or taking its inspiration from. But then you look at it, and from the back, it's got like the Ibanez Joe Satriani kind of profile almost, of being super curvaceous and thin-bodied. Loads of belly cuts and carvings and comfortable, what's the word? You get the idea. It's slinky. Yeah, beveled on the top as well, super thin, super lightweight. You've also got the really cool idea of mounting the Telly bridge pickup straight into the wood, which is a great idea. I know the G. Smith Telecaster signature Fender guitar had that, and it's really one of the only other guitars I've ever seen with this bridge pickup idea of putting it straight into the wood. Gives a little bit more resonance to the sound. So tonally, this is very, very different to all the other guitars, and I'm just going to check the specs so I can confirm as to why that would be. So let's see. Yeah, contoured, that's the word I was looking for. Contoured. Older body on this guitar, maple neck, and this is the only guitar, as I said, that doesn't have the roasted maple on it. So it's really, really smooth, just good old standard maple. But when maple is done right, it works really well, because it's got tonal property that roasted maple has a different tonal property to. So as I said, there's no better, there's just different. Rosewood fingerboard. These are Tom Anderson's own TV1 and TV3 pickups. And it says there's a push-pull pot with a booster, which indeed there is. So I'm going to walk you through some of the tones. Clean and dirty. Straight away, just acoustically. I don't know how well that's going to come across, but there's a lot of depth to this guitar, and I don't know why that would be. Let's see what it sounds like electrically. So yeah, I saw somebody commented this is probably the least Telly sounding of the bunch. That's not a bad thing. I think Tom Anderson's really defined their own voice with guitars like this, and that's really cool. So especially on the higher gain sounds, when I put that booster on, it sounds nothing like a Telly on the bridge pickup, even though it's a Telly pickup. So it's just one of those things that you can never really judge a guitar by its spec sheet. That's very important. That's why we do so many listing videos, to prove what each guitar sounds like independently. And that's why we do these kind of shootouts as well, so you get the idea that not all T-styles are alike. Hopefully that proved that point. Really like that. I'm sure it's going to disappear very quickly. What overdrive, somebody asked. That was the Z drive with a Mad Professor Little Green Wonder in front of it for that high gain thing. Those are the two pedals I got today. Okay. Right, so let me talk about this, which is a Suhr Classic T. I kind of feel that Suhr are along the same kind of lines as Xotic. So when I talked about that earlier, I said that they marry up the best attributes of vintage and modern kind of elements of the guitar design. Suhr do a very similar thing, but I'm sure most people will be aware by this point that they do it in a different way. John Suhr has a different ear to the designers at Xotic and the designers at Fender as well. He's established his own voicing in these guitars. Despite this being a Classic T, is the model, it's the most traditional sounding of all of the T-style guitars that they make. But it's still got a few of the modern twists to it, and this guitar is actually one of the dealer select guitars as well, with the roasted maple neck, which differs from the standard Classic T. So it's just worth pointing that out. Upper fret access, but on the surface it still looks like a traditional T-style guitar. Tonally though, it's got its own thing going on. So these are Suhr's Classic T pickups. I'm not going to talk too much about this guitar because I feel like I talk about Suhr a lot, which is justified but kind of negligible at this point because Suhr guitars are amazing. So let me show you what it sounds like, and you can judge for yourself how close you think it squares up to a Fender, or if you just think it's its own thing. Here we go. Once again, hugely versatile guitar. I don't even need to say that anymore at this point because all T-style guitars are versatile, but every one of these has done it in a different way. The Suhr, I think, they have this unique recipe going on where they're thick sounding, they have a lot of body and kind of smoothness to them, but they've still got, it's not at the expense of like being overwound in the pickups or losing clarity or definition. It's a little bit of a paradox really with Suhr guitars, and it's the same rule apply for the Classic T. It's also worth pointing out that if I sit here with the gain sound on in front of this amp, this is another noiseless guitar, so it's true single coil pickups, but you've got a dummy coil under the pickguard, which means that you don't get the hum that you would typically get with single coil pickups, but the pickups themselves are still true single coil. So that's a kind of a novel way to do it. Works really well to get rid of that noise. Somebody asked about the neck feel. Jonathan Burton asked about my favourite neck feel. Very difficult to pick. I'm so used to the feel of a Suhr neck. That roasted maple kind of... I'm not sure even what the profile of this is. It's... let me see. Even C. So between this and probably the Xotic, I think are two of the nicest necks. They're super smooth. The fret edges are amazing. They're not even there. The profile is just kind of right. It's neither completely vintage nor really modern. I think this is a little bit more modern feeling. The Xotic is a little bit more classic feeling. The neck profile in the Xotic is a modern C, they call it, but I think it feels a bit more vintage. All of them feel great though. The Reverend, even for a guitar at this price point with a roasted maple neck and a super comfortable profile, it's quite thin, but they're all just fantastic. But my personal picks would be for the Suhr and the Xotic, just two different kind of takes on the same kind of hybrid vintage modern feel. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, that's enough talk about this guitar. Let's move on to the last one. Every time we do these live videos, I tell myself it's going to be less than an hour, and it never is, I'm afraid. So thank you for sticking this out if you're still there. I appreciate it. Luke doesn't appreciate it, but whatever. Don't even care, mate. So here we are, last guitar of the bunch. Sorry?
I appreciate it, don't worry.
Oh, Luke appreciates it. Great, okay. That's sorted then. Here we go. So last guitar of the bunch today is from a brand that last week when we did the single cut shootout, loads of people were really into the Eggle that we had in that last video. So this is a Patrick James Eggle Oz. This is his take, obviously, on the Classic T kind of design. Just going to get it in tune first before I start yabbering on about it. So yeah, Patrick James Eggle guitars, handmade here in the UK. I said last week in the single cut shootout that we too often forget about our own builders. There's such an abundance of amazing American brands and brands from all around the world. It's easy to overlook some homegrown stuff sometimes. So Eggle is making amazing stuff, and he's one of the most well-rounded guitar builders that there is, because he makes amazing single cut set neck guitars, as we saw last week. He makes really nice S-style guitars, which you can see a couple of on the stand behind me, which I think is called his 96 model. And then he makes amazing T-style instruments, acoustics. He does the lot. So this guitar, I remember when this came in, and we actually featured this on a live video, one of the first live videos we did back when the lockdown all started, and we were throwing about some different ideas for live streams. And this came up on the top of the list, and a lot of people talked about it at the time as being an amazing sounding guitar. Again, you kind of get a similar vibe of this guitar than that you do with the Suhr, in that they are a little bit more of a modern take on this design. This guitar kind of has that unique modern identity a little bit more brazenly than the Suhr does. Even stuff like flipping the control panel around so that the pickup switch is actually further away from you than the volume and tone controls are. And I guess that's to kind of make it easy to do the swells with the volume. It's just a different thing, and it's something that Mr. Eggle decided to put right at the front, one of the first things you notice about his guitar, what makes it different. So that's something. Other specs, Swamp Ash body, so get very light. It's a master grade roasted maple neck, which is quite nice and flamey for something that doesn't really claim to be super flamey. The headstock is amazing on the back of there, and on the fingerboard as well. You've also got a 12-inch radius on this guitar, so it's the flattest radius of all of these guitars, I think. Bar from the Suhr, which has a compound 9 to 12-inch radius. This is 12 all the way. Soft V shape on the neck profile, so it's a little bit more vintage feeling, I think, than some of the real slim C-shape necks. And as was the case with the single cut last week, you've got Mojo pickups in this guitar, which again hand wound in the UK. So let me show you some tones, and then I'll end up with a few of my thoughts on it, and you can tell me what you think of this wonderful guitar. I did that in reverse. I went from rock to classic Telly tones, but you get the idea. Another super versatile guitar. To me, I think this has a real distinct personality. This is like a proper, rude rock machine, which is why I really like it as a predominantly rock-based kind of player, as I'm sure a lot of players out there are. If you just want a Telly sound, but with something with a bit more heft and testosterone to it, shall we say, I think this guitar does that very well as being able to move backwards and do cleaner stuff as well. The overdrive, as some people were asking, was the Dr. Z drive with a little green wonder from Mad Professor as well. It's a combination of those two at various points. That's about it. I think I've covered the lot. Hopefully, if you were previously unconvinced on the versatility and the continuing relevance of the T-style design, I think, you know, it develops itself in the late 40s and it's still incredible to this day. It's still unbeatable in a lot of situations, and the amount of different spins that are now on this design, they're all authentic, they all offer something different. Nothing is trying to sort of shortchange another design. They just do amazing stuff. All of these builders, we're really pleased to have them all under one roof here. So if you want to find out any more about any of these brands that I've talked about, or if you want to check out any more of these guitars that I've played in the video, or any of the other products that are in the video, check out the links in the live chat. You can check out the latest newsletter as well. If you haven't already subscribed to that, there'll be a link in the live chat to do that. I believe that's all about this wonderful new Reverend Axis Purple Gristlemaster this week. So check that out. Make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube, and do me a favor as well, if you are already subscribed, make sure you tap the bell icon so that you get notified whenever we do these live videos or whenever we upload our regular content, which there's going to be a lot more stuff coming out over the next week. We want to keep this as frequent as we possibly can to keep you all entertained while this horrendous worldwide pandemic is still ongoing. We're still, thankfully, making some content for you guys. So I hope you're enjoying that. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. I'll see you next Friday for another live stream. Until that point, have a great weekend. It's bank holiday, so I hope you all enjoy it. Look after yourselves. Take care. I'll see you next week. Cheers.